Well, hello and welcome everybody to the Marshall home. My name is Chris O'Keefe, one of the two sons of Ann O'Keefe that we're here to remember. I'm curious how many people have joined on Zoom, because I'll share with them that there's about 20 or so folks here. Do we have a Zoom number? No? I'm going to be wearing multiple hats today as I'm behind the podium. One of the hats is as the host. I'm going to be just giving information about the program, what we're going to be doing, and so on. And then at some point I'll be a eulogy speaker, and I'll probably be much more emotional then than I am now because I'll be sharing about my mom and what she meant to me. But keeping with the organizational mode, let me just share that we're planning to have three speakers. There's myself, and followed by my brother Tom, and then my uncle Roy. And then what we're going to do is see if there's people here in attendance that would like to come up to the podium to speak. There are technical reasons why I'd ask you to come to where I am in the front of the microphones as opposed to where you are because of capturing the images for Zoom and of course for the audio. So you can think about that if you like. And just a side note, I can't remember if people on Zoom who are attending saw a note from me indicating that we may have Zoom people share. There have been some technical issues that have happened that can take place, and we won't be able to do that. So I apologize, but I hope you'll bear with us and get some. I want to use the word closure. That's really the goal from my point of view. We're here to think of her, but I kind of view it that we're here to do something for ourselves as well, which is to try to, come to some peace with. See, I can't. It's going to be like this maybe a bit because, as after my mom passed, there have been things that trigger, sadness for me. And one of them is talking about her. It's just as simple as that. Because I just had such a good relationship with her. So just bear with me as I have, things to share. But emotions will come up, and I'm sure you'll understand that. It's just the way it goes. So I want to talk first, before we go into the eulogies, about the house itself. I know that it's customary to have a church or a chapel. It feels very spiritual. So the story is that this is a very special house to my mom. It's the home of Shelley and Dave Marshall. They're both with the Navy. They're both retired from the Navy. Both were Navy captains. And both were friends of my mom and were both very supportive as she was working on completing her book. The book that, of course, was a passion in her life about her career with the Navy Family Support Program. So when I was searching for places, Mom didn't really have she was a Christian and a churchgoer when she was in California, but she didn't connect with a church in Virginia, and so there wasn't a clear place to go. I thought of a Navy chapel. That would have been fantastic, but there are security issues, I think, these days where people who go to a Navy chapel have to be, vetted or something like that. So I was talking with Shelley Marshall, and she said, well, why don't you have it at our house? And it really grew on me. It really did, because the book was so meaningful to my mom's life. It's almost like, as close as you can get to an autobiography. And here's to the house where she came to work on what was her passion. And so I viewed this house as the most spiritual building that we could have a memorial gathering. And I hope, you'll join me in that sentiment. So the structure of the event, as I say, is going to have us speaking, and then we'll have there'll be an invitation where I'll ask if anyone here has to speak. I'm at the point where I'm ready to, as emotional as I already am, as I'm ready to move into the first eulogy, which is from me. So I sort of have to put on another hat and now be, instead of a host organizer, now be, the son. Ann O'Keefe sharing about her being gone. My name is Chris O'Keefe, and I am the son of Dr. Ruth Ann O'Keefe. And in talking about my mother's life, And even with all the emotions I have going on, I'm going to start with a joke. And it's not a very funny joke, but it's very on target to frame something that I want to say about my mom. So you can bear with me. The joke has to do with dissertations, the document that people need to create in order to get a doctorate. And it's not part of the joke, but my mom did have a doctorate. She did have to do a dissertation. So these documents can be 80,000 words in length. They can be the size of a novel. They can take years to write, lots of research. And so somewhere along the line, someone asked the question, what is the shortest dissertation that's ever been written? And the joke is that it was Einstein, that he took a piece of paper and he wrote E equals mc squared and he handed it in. And he became a doctor. This is just a joke, but the reason I share that one is because I'm about to give the shortest eulogy ever for a son to a mother. And it's a one-sentence eulogy. She was a wonderful mother. Now, I'm going to say more, but everything I say comes back to that, everything. She was just a wonderful mother. She was supportive. She was kind. She was loving. She was nurturing. She was a friend. She was a guide. She was funny. She had a great sense of humor. She cared deeply, very deeply, for people. And I'll share that as she was getting sick in the hospital in August, of course, just recently, I was sending emails out to friends and family. That's how a lot of you know to be here. And I was sharing about her condition and how things weren't necessarily going very well. And then when she did pass away, now the emails became about what's next, including, of course, this event that we're at right now. And naturally, after she passed, people would reply to emails, and they would call me on the phone, and the calls were just amazing. She had many friends I really didn't have a talking relationship with, but now I was talking with him. And if you think I'm emotional now, imagine, phone call after phone call, just like that, because they loved her. People loved her. They couldn't talk about her without doing what I'm doing now. She just touched people in so many ways in that regard. So regarding my, what I would call my mom's magical ability to connect with people, I have a story to share. This happened within the last few years. We were driving along. We came to a shopping center that had a giant food. And as we were driving, I told my mom, there's a woman that's up here on the corner. I've seen her before. There's a very good vibe about her. I've given her some money because of that. She said, well, I want in. I want to do that. So we pulled up, and she's a very, very pleasant woman, with a sign and everything. And I think I've given a few bucks, but my mom had a 20, and she gave the 20, and because of the way it situated, I said, this is from my mom, and stuff like that. So we drove off, and that was really just the end of the story. I think there wouldn't be any other, chapter 2 to it. But about a week or so went by, and Mom knew I was driving in the same general area, and she said, if you see Rebecca, give her $20. And I said, who's Rebecca? I didn't know Rebecca. She said, it's the woman that we were meeting just recently. And I remembered now that it wasn't just giving her money. My mom had asked for her name and wanted to have some, pleasant conversation. And of course, right. So I went by, and then I, shared with Rebecca. And then whenever Mom and I were driving this route, we'd look, she'd want to know. She'd, go to her purse even before we could see whether someone was standing on the corner. She wanted to be prepared. And then one day Rebecca wasn't there. I drove by, no one. And then weeks happened and nobody was there. And my mom would say, if I'm not with you, make sure, you do something for Rebecca. And I began to tell her that I think that maybe the people at the shopping center, didn't want anybody there because it's not just Rebecca. Nobody's standing at that corner. So I think it's all over. And Mom said, I hope she's doing okay. I hope she's doing okay. And that story comes to my mind because I think of all the friends I was talking with on the phone, people who really had some time with my mom, people who went to school with her or knew her from NARF or knew her from Alzheimer's support meetings, knew her from her career, from education, friends, and far more contact than our dear friend at the corner. Imagine the impact she would have made when she had that much time, and that she'd be coming from the same place. She wants to be sure that you're doing okay. So I could tell many more stories, as you can imagine, of her warmth and her heart. But it's all about how she had an ability to care for someone else that others might not see that there was a bridge to connect to that person. And that consideration didn't stop her. It didn't bother her. She made a bridge to your heart. And she was, my friends, a wonderful mother. And I miss her. And in my own spiritual way, I say to the universe, I hope she's doing okay.
I'm Tom Davey, her other son. I've gotten those phone calls and emails too. I took one of those phone calls, and I can't answer the other ones. Because everyone ends with, what can I do for you? And all I want to answer is, I want my mother back. That ain't happening. So if you're on this Zoom call and I haven't returned a call or an email, please forgive me. If I don't get to it now, I'll get to it when I get overseas and I have some time to answer these emails. It's interesting about the story about Rebecca. Day before Mom died, despite her pain, her first question to me was about the status of my Afghanistan family, who were still behind enemy lines and hiding. Not about herself, not about her status, but about someone else. And as Chris kind of put it, she had an aura that attracted many people from cultures and beliefs and personalities. She really could put anyone to ease. Was talking with an old girlfriend that I hadn't seen in, 25 years. And she said, as others have said, I may break up with you, but I'm not breaking up with your mom, or as some have actually said, not breaking up with our mom. Her ability to laugh at herself was kind of added to this. In Hong Kong, she was trying to speak to a local Chinese high school student on a bus. And you know how you speak to a foreigner? Yeah, slow, simple English so they understand you. And she asked if he understood English. Unfortunately, she missed the fact in Hong Kong that this young man was wearing a prep school blazer and responded in perfect British English. Why, yes, I do speak English. Do you? Now, her time at Head Start and Home Start enriched generations of young children and their parents. I plagiarized that line from Pam. One of my boyhood friends, who became a public school teacher himself, still thanks her for teaching his younger brother to read after every other system had failed. And you wonder how many other people she taught to read, either herself or her dissertation, which became a whole reading program, the Starter 101 program. Now, she could have stayed at Health Education Welfare, HEW, comfortable environment, surrounded by like-minded individuals. But instead, she rose to the challenge the Navy offered her in an environment nothing like HEW. Now, as we all know in the Navy, ships are safest in port, but that's not where they're meant to be. And with that, Mom sailed into constant storms, emerging as a major force of change for my beloved Navy. Her saga is documented in her book. I'd like to thank Dr. Henry Winkler, who wrote a wonderful review of that book. If you don't have a copy, there's a whole bunch of copies here. If you're still Navy and you go on base, take a copy for the Family Support Center. Navy's chosen not to support the distribution of her book for fear of supporting a for-profit item, even though she ain't making a profit off it. They're all being donated. So I just been mailing off her book to the Family Support Centers, putting in my commander retired card, and so far the response has been pretty good, although the CNO's office is pissed off at me. But my DASD is happy with me, so what the hell. And we control we control NC2, so what are they going to do? You guys know what that is, some of you. Now, despite this, her legacy is her ideas and efforts are now the rule rather than the exception in the Navy. She did instill in me a call to serve and a love of travel. And my eulogy is going to be a little bit shorter because, as I mentioned some family yesterday, with Mom's death, the third pillar of my moral foundation has now gone away. I'm not going to go into the other two aspects. This is going out on video, and I still have a security clearance to deal with. But speaking of travel and her future goodness of fit for the Navy, she knew that while honesty was a core value, there are just times to veer off the straight and narrow. Chris, you remember this back in Hong Kong, some of the younger kids, around 10 years old, were throwing buckets of water off the balcony of the hotel. I guess they figured that the buckets of water would disperse like rain. They didn't. One bucket soaked the wife of the bank president, who was dressed to the nines. Well, the police responded. Unfortunately, Mom entered the room just before the police arrived. And Mom stated, "I have been here the entire time. These are not the ones who have thrown the water." Kind of like, these are not the droids you're looking for. They had never heard Mom lie before. Now later, in Navy fashion, she did go down to the front desk and stated that while she did not know who threw the water, she assured them it would not happen again. Thank you.
I'm Roy Harris, and I will always be known as the baby brother, although I turned 75 in 2 weeks. Sorry, she'll miss that. And I do have some prepared remarks, but Christopher, you got me going on this one. I got to tell it. I have to talk a little bit, all the nice things you've heard about Anne already, that she did have a tough side. She really did have a tough side. And if the number of you never saw that tough side, I'm going to tell it to you now. It's a story about Anne and her son Christopher visiting Australia on a tour. And Anne and Christopher decided that one of the legs of that were going to be to go to the center of Australia to visit the magnificent Ayers Rock. Some of you may know it. It's a great feature of Australia that really shouldn't be missed. I guess I've never been to Australia, but seen pictures and it shouldn't be missed. So they took off, long hike, Christopher and Anne heading for Ayers Rock. Long trip, and Anne had some trouble making it. And so she said, Christopher, I'm going to stay here. You go ahead. It's a wonderful thing to do. And, I'll certainly miss the fact that you go to the top of Ayers Rock and you sign in on the book. I'll miss that, but please, you go ahead. I'll just wait for you here. So Christopher took off. long trek, went up to the top of Ayers Rock, came back, Anne greeted him and said, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to go with you. I would have loved to put my name in. I couldn't do it. And Christopher said, "Don't worry, Mom. I wrote your name in the book." This is the side of Anne you've never heard, probably. In righteous indignation that came from our father, Roy Harris, who never strayed from the principles that he'd been taught as a child, she said to him, "Christopher, you should not have done that. That was a terrible thing to do. I didn't make it to the top, and there's no reason why my name should be there since I did not do the track." And Christopher said to her, "Mom, don't worry. I wrote Anne O'Keefe. She tried but failed." So that's your tough friend. So prepared remarks will be a little less humorous, unless of course I blow it. I had intended to draw off the YouTube video, which I know a number of you have seen, and others of you will have a chance to see. So I'll just kind of skim over some of the references to it. But my main job here was really to talk about some of those earlier days that only a few of us know about with Anne growing up. There's some photographs in there that have these great sepia-toned pictures of her at family Christmases where we would all get together. She would come back from Bryn Mawr, and my sister Judy, her sister Judy, would come from McMurray. And there's one picture there where I'm 3 years old and Anne is holding me. I look at that picture and I say, I never was that small. She'd have me in her arms. The old shots are just truly amazing because, those were the 50s. And when I was in Webster Groves, there's also a wonderful picture of our house that you'll get a chance to see. So these were great days when the family really was inseparable. Everybody wanted to be home. And that included our older brother, the number one child of the foursome, David, our beloved brother David, who we lost tragically in 1980 when he was 50 years old. He'd come in from Indianapolis, where he worked with the IRS. And I remember in those early years, I was so impressed that I had a brother who was sort of a G-man. That was before I realized what taxation was all about. So anyway, we would all be together, and I remember always being so happy with Judy. Judy was the musical one in the family who would always play and sing, and at Christmas the house was just totally lilting. And I love that because to me music was always a chore. Our mother was a piano teacher, and music for me was coming home from school and I knew every clinker a child could make. Here we go, up a road to a birthday party. I would hear them all the time. So anyway, Judy taught me that music was more than getting the notes right. So the thing about Judy, though, is that Judy was not just Anne's sister. Judy was Anne's best friend. And when Anne was a little girl, she was famous, and Judy told me about this because I was too young to know about it. She was famous for bravely stopping our mother, who was the disciplinarian in the family, when she was getting some instruction, teaching Anne about something that she was doing. Something to do might be something like tying her shoes or helping feed the dog or something. And Anne would get impatient. She didn't want to have this instruction. And she would say to our mother, "And do. And do." How Judy and I laughed when we talked about this, in later years too. But our mother was just shocked to be told such a thing. There's a way to do things, and it's not "and do." So as I put those early descriptions of Anne into perspective in my mind recently, it suddenly became clear who Anne was in my life in many ways, and perhaps who she may have been in the lives of so many others of us who are here today, either in this room or in Zoom, I suspect all of us here may think of Anne as a builder, as a connector, and as Anne the doer. Anne do. When others often weren't sure how to build or connect or to do something, maybe like in the Navy, sound familiar? Anne do. Well, I was so proud of Anne and her amazing accomplishments with Head Start, the Navy's creation of the Global Family Service Centers, and with her work with the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation in Jacksonville, Florida. There, she got to give away thousands of dollars to people with noble causes and helping others. Perfect job for her, truly amazing. And do. It certainly fit. But what was most amazing to me was that this woman of so many accomplishments was proud of me, too. Proud of Judy, proud of David. As a college student, a soldier in Germany, and then breaking into the journalism profession as a classic rookie, many years as a rookie, I'll tell you, she would read my stories. She'd visit me wherever I was. When I worked for the Wall Street Journal, she'd come and visit me in my various duty stations. Was in Pittsburgh, she'd come out and see me. When I was in Los Angeles, she'd come out there, and do. And most recently in the Boston area, when my wife Eileen, who you'll meet here, Eileen McIntyre, and we've now lived there for 21 years, visits, calls, texts from this busy sister of mine, and do. She would be there. Always made me think, gee, I must be doing something right if my powerful, busy sister, Anne, appreciates it so much. Does that sound familiar to anybody here? That her appreciation meant a lot? I like to think I never took all that doing, Anne's love, her praise, and being there for granted. Even when she came to see me in my community theater productions, which is a hobby of mine, played McKinley's Killer in Sondheim's Assassins. Oh, she wanted to see that. She and Judy came out, saw that show. I had a little bit part in Oklahoma, one of her favorite composers, Richard Rodgers, and Rodgers and Hammerstein. She came out to see me in Oklahoma. The farmer and the cowman should be friends. If you watch the video, you hear Rodgers and Hammerstein background because that was Anne's kind of music. But of course, Anne's support of my writing is what meant the most, certainly to me. She let it be known that, for her at least, I was carrying on our dad's tradition in his Pulitzer Prize-winning career. And in a very real way, it was Anne's support of me that led to an entire book on the Pulitzers that I wrote. My dad had been involved with Pulitzer Prizes at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I wrote a program that Anne came to see about the Pulitzer Prize tradition at the Post-Dispatch, and that got me into doing a book. And Anne was the book's biggest fan, I'll tell you. Just like I think I hope I have some dispute of this, but I think I was the biggest fan of her book. But I know there are others here who are competing with me for that title. So think about it. Her building, her connecting, and most of all, her doing brought the best out in me, and I think in all of us, didn't it? I think of my wife Eileen's drive to build ancestry charts for our family, which is really a giant task, at least the way Eileen did it. Really extensive, all branches of the family, and Anne so admired that. Somebody who connected, these were connections. She had more connections than she ever dreamed of when she looked at that chart. Looking back, one of Eileen's and my greatest gifts to her might have been the Hawaiian trip for Thanksgiving in 2015 that we went on with her and with Judy. It was a family reunion of magnificent proportions, and the reason we picked Hawaii was that Anne's dear, long-time, and far too seldom visited friend Lois Ellen Dada lived in Hawaii, and Eileen and I really wanted to have this reunion and get her back together with Anne. You'll see photos of that. I invite you, if you haven't seen the show, to look at those photos and see the Hawaiian photos with the hugs. There's a shot of the three of us children sitting with Lois Ellen. The place she took us was a little place at the airport called Bite Me, and we all had fish. It was just great. So you'll see those photos, you'll see the hugs, you'll see the leis being handed out, you'll get the picture. But now the time has come to remember her and her phenomenal contributions to the nation and to all of us individually. And and you did for all of us. You really did. God bless you all.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Uncle Roy. Boy, my mom would have loved to be here. I mean, this was her cup of tea. People she knew and loved, to be around them, that's what gave her energy and joy in life, and she really would have loved all of these things being said. But as you look at me, please see me as an organizer for a moment, because this is a time where I want to talk about you and your interest in coming up here to the front. We've had our formal speakers, if you will, the prepared speakers talk. And I want to see now if there are others who are here that would like to come up. Let me just say first that what I would prefer, or what I'm picturing in my mind, is that if I see that you're raising your hand, you'd like to come, but you do so, and that when that person finishes, if anyone else is sort of feeling the connection and would simply know that it's time for them to come up. If no one does, I'll come up to invite people again, but that's what I'd picture, that you feel comfortable after one speaker is finished to just see that the podium is empty and that you can come up. So if I may put it out to the room, is there anybody who's willing to come up and share with us your thoughts about Anne, even if it's just briefly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Winkler, the fellow from the Naval Historical Foundation who had the pleasure of getting a call from Anne and talking about her book. And I said, wow, that the book, we get history books all the time, all right? And it got to a point where, I have a stack of books on my desk, and I came up with this idea of, okay, rather than me reading all these books, I would dole them out to members of our foundation, and I'd get these members of the foundation to do book reviews, okay? Well, when this book came in, I looked at it and I said, oh, this is a keeper. This is one I want to take a look at, because what she did is she's writing a history of an area of the Navy that the Navy isn't very, they don't have historians at the different commands, unlike the Army. If you're an Army general, you have a historian in your duffel bag. The only historical outfit in the Navy is at the Navy History and Heritage Command in D.C. There's no historians at these various family service centers. And if it wasn't for somebody like her to cover the story, it just would never have been told. And going through her book, it reminded me, her perseverance reminded me when I was a young midshipman at Penn State. They introduced us to this elderly captain. And she introduced herself, my name is Captain Grace Hopper. And she talked about the struggle she had to deal with the Navy bureaucracy to, fund computers. And she's asking for like tens of thousands of dollars. And people are just laughing her out of the room saying, nobody comes in here and asks for tens of thousands of dollars. They usually come in here and ask for tens of millions of dollars. And she just was this remarkable woman who took us into the cyber age. And I just at the end of the class, there was a young female midshipman. She stood up and she asked Captain Hopper, what do you think about the Navy as a career for women? And Hopper, she pondered on. She at this time she's in her 70s. She said, like, I'm thinking about it. Well. this is the type of woman that, we're talking to Anne and reading what she did, coming into this whole bureaucracy that is the Navy at a time in the late 70s where it's a really male dominated environment. And just reading her, driving up and seeing that there's a flag parking spot. Well, she's thinking that, that's where, where the guys who raise and lower the flag, come in. But the thing is that she didn't let that stop. That didn't stop her. She got in there, and we're talking about tough woman. She was tough within the Navy bureaucracy. She got what needed to be done because the problem. I was in the fleet in 1970. I joined the Navy in '76 as a midshipman at Penn State. Came in the Navy 1980 at this time. It's an all-male environment, and the way, as I kiddingly said, if the Navy wanted you to have a wife, they'd issue one in your duffel bag. The Navy was we had a retention issue in the Navy. Sailors are getting out because we were driving the fleet hard. We're going on when I was under Suribachi, over a 3-year span, we did 3 6-month deployments to the Mediterranean. We did 6 deployments to the Caribbean and went up to. This is destructive to the families. We had situations with housing where you had issues with husbands. They would come home. And it was a lot of uncomfortable situations because the families at home just weren't getting the support. And she changed that. Okay, she made a big difference to our United States Navy, under Admiral Haywood, and I'm so glad that she took the time to document that in her book. So. Anyway, it's a kind of tragic. My wife Mary, another Bryn Mawr graduate, we talked, and I said, "Oh, by the way, my wife Mary went to Bryn Mawr," and on the phone to, and there's something about these Bryn Mawr women, So anyway, I'm as I'm talking around, I lived in St. Louis. I found out I'm a Washington University graduate. Wall Street Journal. I just worked on a book with a fellow Wall Street. The connections here are just remarkable. I just regret that we always wanted to have lunch with her. The COVID came, So, and then of course I got the call. So, anyway, it was. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and invite me to this gathering. Thank you.
Just 2 very quick things to echo some of the themes I heard from Roy and Tom and Chris.
You have to introduce yourself so that.
Okay, I'm Eileen McIntyre, and I am married to the wonderful Roy Harris, and so Anne was my sister-in-law. And there are 2 things that I remember that came to mind as I listened to the 3 of you wonderful men today. One is that Anne, when she cares about someone and has formed a connection, she doesn't let go. And Tom mentioned, even a former girlfriend, she may be leaving Tom, but not his mother. Well, Roy had a wife early in his life after college, wonderful woman who I now know, Patricia Divine, who may be on the Zoom today, and you'll see pictures of her in the Zoom. And the reason is that Roy and Christine may have formally gotten divorced, but Anne didn't let go, and you'll see pictures of her traveling in Europe with Christine. So that's one thing. Clearly, that was part of her life, part of who she was. The other was she really was an amazing big sister, and I can testify to that because when Roy and I were starting to date long distance, and I lived in New York City, worked in New Jersey, Anne got wind of this. She was then working for the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation, and she traveled quite a bit to check out the institutions that had applied for grants. And she let Roy know that she had a trip coming up and that she could arrange to travel through Newark Airport, which is in the state of New Jersey, where I worked, and she wanted me to meet her for coffee. And I met her flight. Those were the days where you actually could go to the gate. And so I was waiting there, and we somehow figured out who we were, and sat in the airport having a cup of coffee and had this wonderful conversation. I just felt like I had known her all my life. And fortunately, I guess I passed the test because that was clearly Anne doing her due diligence just the way she was doing them for the Arthur Vining Davis Foundation, but this time she was doing it as a big sister. And so I just wanted to share those things that came to mind as you were all telling stories about her.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamie, and I am one of the people that helped Anne with the final stages of the book. I had met her totally coincidentally, and a friend of mine had mentioned that I was self-published because I have no marketing skills and no ability to find myself a publisher. And I said, well, I'll just self-publish on Amazon and it'll be a great bit of fun. So when my friend mentioned this to Anne, then Anne said, wait a second, you mean I don't have to have anybody tell me what to do with my book? And I said, that's right. And she said, and they're not going to tell me that I have to change my grammar or when I choose to use commas that might not be necessary. And I said, that's exactly what I like about it too sometimes, Anne. So we had not known each other for very long, but I figured I should get up and say something today because I speak publicly often for work. And Anne always used to say how she would like to see me to give a big speech. And we never had that opportunity because of COVID. But when we talk about Anne being that immediate supporter, that doer, it was to the point where if she knew I was working on a book, then as soon as I had the first rough print copy, then I was to send her one. And then she would read my entire book overnight. And then she would send me mail back the copy with all of these beautiful handwritten notes, and she would find these nuanced typos of mine that I would never have found myself, and just give me such lovely advice that I thought, how is this woman who has so many people in her life have the time to spend helping me? So the last time that I saw Anne, once I was fully vaccinated and she was too, and we had kind of felt safe about it, then I went out to dinner with her and Christopher. And the reason I was over wasn't just to go out to dinner, that was a side perk, but it was to pick up a case of technical, grammatical editing. She used to get on me so bad because I have a trouble with lay versus lie, and I just can't seem to overcome it. And so she would call me and she would say, Jamie, I know we've talked about this before, but on page 87, and I would say, yes, Anne, thank you. I'm sorry. And so, how fitting that she was able to say, this is what I want you to have of mine. She said, you're probably the only person in my immediate circle that wants a bunch of technical grammatical editing books at this point. And I need to get them out of my way because I have things to do. And so I did not, obviously, nobody really does think that it's going to be the last time you see somebody in person. But, I go back home and I've got this case of books on my table in my writing room. It's just unbelievable that I would have met somebody, that all of this would have happened, that I had all of her wisdom on my first 3 little baby tester novels, and I just couldn't have been more grateful.
Hi everyone, my name is Melody Zargari. My mom and my family and I are dear family friends of Anne. Sorry Mom, I'm going to tell the story of how you met. My mom met my Auntie Anne at a Weight Watchers class when I was 1 year old, 18 months to be specific, which my Auntie Anne loved telling people that she's known me since I was 18 months old. I would be at the daycare at the Weight Watchers Center, and then after class they would pick me up and they'd go sit and have a cappuccino. And I became very fond of my mom's new friend, and my mom said, this is Miss Anne, and my Auntie Anne would respond, no, Miss is too formal, she should just call me Anne. And my mom said, nope, that's too informal, so they decided on Auntie Anne. And she was so much more than that to me, though. She, both of my grandmothers lived in Iran, but my parents were new to the country, and she filled that gap with just so much grace and so much love. when I was younger, our bonding trips really involved a lot of trips to the movies, always with popcorn. She would take me shopping even though she had absolutely no interest in Limited 2 and teenage girl clothing. She would make that very clear, but she would take me shopping anyways. And as I grew older, our relationship matured too, and it really became one of the most special relationships in my life. She, at 75 years old, came with my mom and I on an entire week of college tours all through New York City and Washington, D.C. Not only was she on the tours, but she was at the very front asking the tour guides many, many, many questions. When I was applying to both college and to law school, she edited up to 15 versions of my admissions essays. And now I have a bit of reputation amongst my friends for being a grammatical stickler, and I think that I get that from her because finally, similar story to Jamie, she said, you know, you're very bright, but people are going to think you're stupid if you don't fix this. And she would always tell me, you know, I'm going to be just a little bit difficult, and I'm going to push you, and I'm going to nitpick this thing, and there's so many ways that I hope that I'm like her, but I'm very difficult. If you've spent any time with me at all, you know this. And I got that from her, and I hope to keep that forever. She's the very best person that I knew, difficult and all. And I'm really thankful that you went to Weight Watchers that day, Mom. I love you.
I'm Judy Wollman. I'm Anne's very lucky sister. And I was lucky to be the little sister of such a great big sister. And I'm so fortunate in that I didn't have a day in my life that I didn't have Anne in my life as a sister. So unique. Oh, and speaking of grammar, I love it. We had that thing about unique and about very unique. And every time we heard that, we would just go, oh, really? You know, you hear it on TV, everyone says it, you know, and there were other grammatical errors that we would go into hilarity over some of them because really it's everywhere now. Television announcers, and you wonder where they were educated. Anyway, but I didn't really want to talk about that, but I did because, I just did. It was cute. But I think the thing that was so unique about my sister, very unique, was that she was generous. She was generous to a fault. One of the most generous people you could ever imagine. I got myself in debt a little bit when I was dating a pretty well-known jazz harmonica player and pianist. And as a harmonica player, it was quite important that his teeth be in good shape, as you can imagine, and he really needed dental implants, okay? Well, if you've ever had dental implants or know anything about dental implants, they run into the tens of thousands of dollars, or they can, and his would have been full mouth. So I mentioned that to Anne, and I wound up actually taking a loan on a house I owned in Palm Springs, kind of a home improvement loan. It was actually a mouth improvement loan, as it turned out. But anyway, he passed away after having a really brilliant career in jazz music, and the loan came due. Oh, and I sort of forgot about it. Home improvement, you know, those things go on for 30 years or something. Well, this one did not. This one was coming due, and so, yeah, I could take money out of my IRA. I could pay for it and all that. But anyway, I mentioned it to Anne, and she said, oh, how many years do you think Ron actually got to play because of these dental implants? And I said, well, maybe 10 or 15 anyway. He really, really needed those dental implants for his career. Anyway, my generous sister, she helped me cover that very generously. I won't go into the details, but just, I promise you, was very generous, and she totally supported the fact that we were able to help him with those dental implants. And it was just one example of the many, many things in which she was just a remarkable woman. So, all right, thank you. That's all I really want to say, and I love her dearly, and she'll always be alive to me, and she is and was my best friend in the world. So, thank you.
first off, I want to apologize for not actually preparing anything. I'm still firmly in the denial stage of grief. So every time I tried to think of something, it didn't happen. But I'm Katrina. I'm Anne's granddaughter, her only biological granddaughter. But as we all know, biology didn't really matter when it came to family for Grandma. I know my cousin Eric is almost certainly watching online from his home in North Carolina, and we grew up together with Grandma. She was, she'd take us to everything together. It didn't matter that, there was no blood relation there. But you can I know a lot of people here are exactly the same. We heard from Melody. But yeah, she's always meant probably more to me, sorry Dad, than probably anybody else in the world. She's done more. We've looked up to her. Wish I'd spent more time with her, especially the last couple years when after we brought her back from California on a nice long driving trip where we had Aunt Judy up until about St. Louis, and she had to get to a concert, I think. It was quite the number of events during that, including we had an instant where we discovered a problem with the car, and the people at the dealership, the place we took the car, said, "Well, you probably would have gotten out before it exploded if you hadn't brought it here." It's like, yeah, and that was one of the. We ended up having, actually, like Grandma would always make lemonade out of lemons. We'd always just go with the flow, and that was one of the things she always say. Well, okay, well we'll just kind of went with it, because it happened time and time again. I think that was a major theme of my relationship with her. Previous cross-country trip when I was 8 with Eric, we had issues where we had soda spilled in the car, we had bananas left in the Las Vegas sun, we had holes in the tires this big, and just go with it. And that was how she did everything. You make the most out of everything, and we've heard a lot of that. Again, sorry for not being very articulate. Didn't get quite as much of that as I wish I had. But she was always my mentor, somebody I looked up to. I started out with the grammar stickler as well, and unfortunately didn't spend enough time as I got older to keep that. But I do remember being incredibly rude when I was little and not considering what I was saying when I was correcting people with their grammar. Thanks. I think it was Lee or Mara that I have a distinct remember for that, doing that too. She kept an essay I wrote in high school called My Mentor, but we can't seem to find it. I really wanted to read that, but that's what she did. She took you in, you were family, and it didn't matter if your relationship with the biology ended. It just kept going. She had lots of friends who she knew briefly, and they've still been in contact up until recently. Sorry, I don't. Yeah, like I said, still pretty strong in the denial stage, because I know once I get through that, it's going to be anger. For her being gone. I'm not ready for that.
Hi, I'm Lee Pierce. Anne was my aunt, my mother's sister. And there are just two things I want to say about her that I remember, and I feel like everybody who knew her is going to relate to this completely. And one of them is her laugh. Her laugh was amazing. And it was like nobody else's. When she laughed, you just felt it in your heart. The other thing I want to say about her is that when you were speaking to her, it was like nobody else was in the room. She just was completely focused. And here is this amazing, accomplished woman who had so much to say herself, but when you were speaking, she was completely focused on you. And I just remember as a little girl feeling so special that she would just shine her sunshine on you when you would speak to her. And she just was amazing, and I will think about her every day. I will miss her.
I'm Charlotte Christ, and I'm probably the only one in the room that can say I knew her less than any of the rest of you, because our connection came because I had, working with the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy in the 90s, had published a history of that office, and somebody that Anne was talking to out in California said, Anne, your name is in this book, Winds of Change. And so Anne immediately ordered the book from Amazon, and then said, well, I need to talk to this author to find out how it got distributed. How did this book come to be? And she paid 95 cents to get my name off of the internet. And I am so grateful that she did, because she was a total blessing. This was July the 25th, the day that she called me. The rest of you have known and are trying to deal with saying goodbye to Anne. She gave me a challenge. And that challenge is to make sure that everybody who needs to know, needs to read that book, has a copy of that book. And that's my determination. And I'm still in contact with the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, McPon Bushy, and he would be here if he could today. He sends his regards. But she sent me books to give to him, and I got them to him, and he said, after reading it, this book needs to be on the desk of every Master Chief in the Navy. So I don't know that we'll get that far with it, but like my book, they didn't publish enough for everybody, but it's shared. And that's what I want to make sure that Anne's book is shared. And I thank you all for making me feel a part of this. This is an amazing family and network. So thank you.
Well, I thank everybody for what you shared. I have a few thoughts right off. And Judy, you said you weren't going to be able to speak. You said it was going to be too emotional. And what? I just got comfortable with everyone. This is exactly my point. It's exactly my point. I think the spirit of Mom shone through on that. I think she was the type of person where you could have your thoughts go one way, and then talking with her or thinking about her, and suddenly you feel it's not so tough to go a different way, even if it means speaking in front of a microphone with people listening and getting emotional and so on. Charlotte Christ is someone that my mom idolized, and what's so sweet about Charlotte is she has no idea what I'm talking about. She doesn't. My mom would say to me, "Oh, I can't believe how happy I am. I've got in touch with Charlotte Christ. She did everything with her book that I want to do with my book, and I have this opportunity." And she passed before they could ever meet. It's one of these amazing stories. Story I told earlier about, the woman on the corner. I mean, they met. I mean, here's Charlotte speaking at my mom's memorial. They haven't even met. I mean, it's an incredible person she was to have these kind of feelings. There's ways I can close the program. I just want to give one more opportunity. Does anybody have a hand to raise to say that they want to come up and say anything? Please, this is a dear friend of the family, Lisa. Please come up. I appreciate it. Anyone on Zoom? Well, we can't. There was a technical issue. Yeah. Please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Stansbury Morgan. I met Anne when I was a waitress in Jacksonville, Florida. Ed and Anne would come in and have brunch, and we all talked about DC because I had gone to DC for an internship, and she just took me under her wing. She was a person who took people under her wing. Recently, she lost her friend Linda. She had been a champion of Linda's for years. She and Ed, I was in not a great situation. She and Ed would come get me and take me to theater. And they said, we're taking you on a date. And Ed would say, I'm going to make a bargain with you. I'm going to take you out to dinner. And you're going to go to watch those blasted musicals with Anne instead of me. And so I said, I think I can handle that mission. And so I became adopted family, so to speak. And I just saw this powerhouse of compassion and love. And I read an article recently about a treatment for depression where they give people psilocybin. People who have been depressed their whole lives and have no hope, who are about to go off a building. They give them psilocybin, and these people, after this guided trip, come to the conclusion that love is the most powerful experience and force in the universe. Anne O'Keefe did not need a tic-tac to tell her that. That was her driving force in her life, is that it's all about love. There was a time when she was working very briefly as a chaplain at a hospital, a woman who everybody's family was furious with her. This woman had left a baby in the care of a person who the baby should not have been cared for by, and the worst possible outcome happened for this infant. Anne looked at this woman who was broken in her mistake and lost, and she baptized that baby. She gave comfort to a woman who was experiencing the worst thing and the most guilt a person could have. And she said, she saw the relatives outside with the judgment, and she said right then that woman was a mother, and she needed that comfort. And there's a song that I think about. It's called Look Over There from La Cage aux Folles. And the lyrics are, when your world spins too fast, when your bubble has burst, someone puts themselves last so that you can come first. So count all the loves that have loved you from now until the end of your life. And when you've counted the ones who loved you before, look over there. Somebody loves you more. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Mary Zargieri, And I'm one blessed woman to say that most people have one mother, but I have two wonderful ones. I was in the United States for 8 months. Melanie was 18 months old when I got to see Anne, yes, in Weight Watchers. And Anne, you did it, but I didn't. So if you think you English people were corrected by Anne, now imagine me. If your issue was only lie and lay, mine was hang and hung. And Mary, this is not how it says. And I'm like, Anne, this is my second language. But still, you're smarter than that. I miss you to the day I die. I will see you soon. I love you, Anne.
Thank you, everybody. I just have so many thoughts come to mind when Ed Brewer, her third husband, passed away. We had a memorial service at it was a church in California, and a lot of people in this room were there, and we got to the exact same part of the event where people were just standing and sharing. And I remember she'd say, "Is there anybody else?" She just wanted to hear more about the husband she had and loved. And we can wrap this up at any time, but I wanted, in the spirit of what my mom said, just put that out to anybody. Okay. I will begin to bring the program to a close. Judy, are you going to be okay if I read the poem? Okay. I'd only want to do it with your blessing. So, I have a story to share, and then a poem to share, and then that will end the day. My mom's favorite song of all time was "Christmas Eve in Washington," and now we can't play it on the TV. Yeah, it's okay. But let me just tell you the story, because I know Maura Sullivan's out there in Zoom land, and it's just a delightful story. If you don't mind, audience, would you please raise your hand if you've heard of the song "Christmas Eve in Washington"? Holy cow, it's almost everybody. Well, it's a phenomenon.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful Christmas song, and something that, as the saying goes, something that you may not know about Anne is that it was her favorite Christmas song. It was kind of almost hard to understand. You'd give her the song. I gave her one copy of the song, and then Ed, her husband, put it on a CD so it ran something like 15 times in a row, and then she would do it. She'd put it in, and 15 times in a row. She just loved it. She loved Christmas. She loved D.C., and she loved the spirit of the song. And one fine day, it was many years ago. Mom had been a lover of the song for well over 10 years, and I was on the internet, and I remember how tough it was to find a copy of the song. I couldn't get it from a record store. I had to, because there was no internet back then yet. I had to go to a radio station. It was just a unique story on the background of that song. It's on Wikipedia if you're interested. It appeared on a radio station and not on a single or an album when it originally came out. So I got it for her, and then she listened to it many times. And then I said, I think I'm going to go to Google and see if, I can get any information if it's on a CD or something. And I saw a post on a message board, and it said, somebody said, "I'm trying to get a copy of Christmas Eve in Washington. It's very difficult." And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, I can relate to this question. Let me see what the reply is. Well, I know the singer of the song. Just contact me, and gave a phone number. I thought, oh, that's going to be interesting. So I called the phone number. And I said, hi, I saw this number from a message post where someone was looking for a copy of Christmas Eve in Washington, and the person said that they know who sang it. And she said, yeah, I'm Maura Sullivan. I just couldn't believe it. So I really think I'm the type of spiritual person that thinks that amazing coincidences can happen. Well, my mom wasn't living in D.C. at the time. She was only visiting for a few days, and it happened to be the window where she was in town, and I'm on the phone with Maura. So I said to Maura, can I get a copy of the CD? And she said, well, if your mom's in town, why don't we do a lunch? And we did. We met at a restaurant, and I didn't tell my mom what was happening, and it was the funniest. It's become like a life-changing story. I'm building it up, and I'm building up. I said, Mom, you excited? You're going to see somebody. If you say so, yeah, sure, I'm excited. So we get to the restaurant, and it's just hilarious. She sees the mystery woman. In other words, my mom sees Maura Sullivan, and of course doesn't recognize who we're talking about, but just knows that I'm very, excited about this connection. And then, of course, when I said the name, it was all over. I said, Mom, this is Maura Sullivan. And the story would finally come out about how I tracked down Maura by chance and how Maura was open. Well, it goes on. Maura would just stay, you've heard all the stories. Maura would just stay in our life. It was just fantastic. And we were just thrilled. We'd have lunches with Maura. And as if that's not enough, Maura ended up getting cancer herself. And we would give our love and support to Maura to please recover. So Maura did recover and then was looking for Mom to get with the same doctors that did the miracle magic for Maura. And there was a lunch that Maura and myself and Mom had in which that was discussed. And we never got around to him. This is how shockingly quick, my mom's passing away was. We just couldn't get to that. We couldn't get to that discussion. We couldn't get to so many things because she passed away. Speaking of the sadness of my mom's passing away, I hope the room will support me, but I want to, if I can, read the last email I ever got from my mom. And I'm sorry, but, just thinking about it, it's so sad. She was in the hospital sick, but she could talk. Roy, bless his heart, my Uncle Roy was down from the Boston area to spend time with her. I got to be honest, it just seemed like she was going to recover. I mean, that's all I let myself believe. This wasn't her death. That's why I'm shocked to be reading this, because this would turn out to be the last email. And I never would have guessed it, when it first came across the line. So I'm giving updates to people. A lot of you know this. I was giving updates about how things are going in the hospital. And I sent it to family, and Roy replied that it was an excellent, clear, useful account, Chris. And he gave some praise to writing it up. And then my mom joined the family conversation and wrote, "Yes, I thank God for this wonderful family team. Now I will try to sleep in bed. Good night." Well, I can't stand it because she just was the kind of person you didn't want to go. You don't want that energy to go. You don't want to believe it can go. And yet, I'm going to read a poem which, in my mind, encourages us to grieve in the spirit of someone who doesn't want you to suffer. And what I mean is that as many tears have been shed here, she doesn't want any of you, including myself, of course, to be brought down or sad, in the coming years. In fact, she would only want the opposite. And so this poem is called "Grieve Not" by Anonymous. If I should soon leave you whom I love to go alone the silent way, grieve not, nor think of me with tears, but laugh and talk of me as if I were beside you. For who knows but I shall be oft times. I'd come could I but find a way. But would not tears and grief be barriers? So when you hear a word I used to say, or see a thing I loved, let not your thought of me be sad. For I'm always loving you, just as I always have. And so on that note, thank you so much for those who are here and for those who attended. There is a YouTube channel that has a slideshow of my mom, over 70 images made. I hope you don't mind my sharing, made by Melanie Zagari. I think it's a wonderful job, and it's very touching, and you can get very emotional. You'll see images of her through her life. And we're going to look at getting, a recording of this made, and if I'm able to, put it onto YouTube, we will, that type of thing. So if you're looking on YouTube, just search for "In Loving Memory of Ann O'Keefe," and you'll find the video. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, and I will say goodbye and bless my mom and her memory. And thank you again.
Hey, Grandma Ann. I have to say, today was a beautiful service in memory of you. I'm looking at it as a celebration of life. I love hearing all the stories about you. A lot of them made me laugh, and I know overall it's sad because you are not here physically, but you are here, and you always will be here. You're always alive to us. And I got a little flustered there towards the end when Katrina was trying to get me to try to call in, be on speakerphone, but I know there was some technical issues, but it's okay. But I want to take this opportunity to kind of, talk to you and share some stories. Overall, I've been very, very blessed to have you as part of my life. You always included me in so many things. It's like Katrina said, that it didn't matter whether we were blood related or not. Clearly today really showed that it didn't matter if you were blood related or not. You considered so many people part of family. And that's just wonderful. That just shows the type of person you were, and I don't know, you still are. I will always cherish our memories. You always included me in a lot of things. I just cherish every memory. Every memory. One of my favorites was the cross-country trip. We definitely had a lot of stories there to tell. I remember, when we were in St. Louis, and then we met Aunt Judy there, and then we drove to St. Joseph. It was pretty late at night, and Katrina and I rode with Aunt Judy, and she had a rental car, and she had a Diet Coke, I remember this, and it spilled in the backseat at some point through the travels, and when we got to the hotel there in St. Joseph, Katrina and I are getting our stuff out of the back seat, and we noticed that her drink spilled and clearly stained because it was like a white carpet. And Aunt Judy saw that, and she says, "Not my car, I don't care." So she was a bad influence. So Aunt Judy, I'm sorry I had to rat you out on this. And that kind of ties back to when, Grandma Ann, when you took us to Las Vegas. That was a story in itself. And I remember I think we ate breakfast at Circus one morning. And then we did some sort of adventure. I can't remember what it was, but Katrina and I had bananas, and we left them in the back seat of the car, right on the back seat of the rental car. And we came back several hours later, not thinking about, it's, summer Las Vegas, and those bananas turned black. It's like they cooked, and they were like oozing out, and they oozed out on the back seat, and you didn't freak out. But I remember just looking at it, and I jokingly said, "Well, it's not my car. It's not our car. We don't care." And the look on your face was priceless, because you're wondering, where in the world did we learn that? We learned that from Aunt Judy. So, Aunt Judy, if you're watching, sorry to rat you out. We had some great old times, and I remember, even in Las Vegas, another story was I remember you had bought us T-shirts from the Riverboat McDonald's in St. Louis on the Mississippi River, and you bought souvenir T-shirts, which I still have, by the way. And mine, I think ours got wet or something like that, or we washed them, and you hung them over the balcony at the Debbie Reynolds Hotel in Las Vegas, and they disappeared. Katrina's was found in the pool area. Mine ended up somehow on the roof of the Debbie Reynolds Hotel, and Sergeant Pat found it a couple days later and returned them to us. So I remember that. Yeah, lots of great memories. Lots of great memories. I'm trying to think of some other stories. But, in the end, you were a big part of life. And I'm glad that you were part of mine. And it was so funny because some people were talking about, being a grammar person, and you used to always send me birthday cards, and you would sign them Grandma, and it took me years to figure out, like, I always questioned why they were in quotations. I promise I'm smarter than I sound. But it finally sunk in. I was like, oh, I know why she signed it as Grandma. But you know what? You're still Grandma. Blood or not. You... We're going to miss you. We're going to miss you. But you're alive in spirit. You're here. And we have so many memories. Some that I just have to laugh at because I feel like we got into a lot of shenanigans. A lot of times, to flat tires, to oh gosh, who knows what else. And one of my favorites was a long time ago when Ace Ventura: Pet Detective came out in theaters, and you took Katrina and I to this movie, and I think you thought it was just going to be like a regular old comedy. Which, now that I look back on it, every time I see that movie, I remember seeing it in theaters, and I remember you took Katrina and I, and that was probably not the most appropriate movie, and I remember asking you a question about some specific scenes in that movie, and you just ignored it. But as an adult watching that movie again, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I asked Grandma Ann, certain questions. But we gotta laugh at it. You always brought so much humor. And the other thing, too, is that I remember the last time I saw you, which was a couple years ago, when you and Katrina came through Greensboro, and we met for dinner, and then the next morning met for breakfast where I had to go to work. And you had mentioned that you were doing the book. And I'm so happy because I have a copy of her book and I've started reading it. And so I'm just so proud of that. I feel like I'm learning a lot about you. So I love you. And we're definitely going to miss you. But you are still alive. So you just keep going on. And there's so much I wish I could tell you about the accomplishments that I'm doing. But you already know. You're watching over. So I love you. I love you so much. And we'll see each other one day. Love you.
Hi, I'm Amy Rubin. My mother was Amy Garthley, or in college, Amy Heinel. And she and Anne lived next door to each other or down the hall from one another in Rhodes Hall in Bryn Mawr. And that's where they met, and they were fast friends all through college. Anne was one of the people who got to meet my dad as he was making his interest in my mother known. He was an employee of Bryn Mawr College, and shortly after graduation, he introduced himself as a suitor. One of the things I loved most about Anne and the place Anne had in my life was that she telegraphed me back to a time when my parents were young and in love. It's not often that adult children get to see their parents through another's eyes in quite that way. I also appreciated that Anne was my mother's college friend, and that could have created some alliance to my mom and with my dad as a third wheel. But she was just as fond of my father. And after my mother passed in 2009, she and my dad stayed in touch, and he really appreciated her friendship, and she was just as fond of him for all that time. And I really loved that she reflected such admiration for my parents, and that was such a joy to behold. I got to, in more recent years, drive Anne and my father to visit a third friend, Krista Lochman, up in Connecticut. And what a joy that was to hang out in the car with Anne for 5 hours. I will miss Anne's role in my life very much, and I'll miss how interesting and interested she always was. Even when I first met her, I think I was 12 or 14, and I tagged along with my mom to a Bryn Mawr reunion. Anne noticed me and made me feel like I was worthy of her attention. She was interested in me, and that stayed constant throughout all the years I knew her. Just a couple of weeks before she passed, she spoke at my father's memorial service. He died in the middle of July, just a few weeks before her. And she spoke there and was as delightful and bright and inquisitive and joyous as always. And at the end of the service, as everyone was saying their goodbyes, and she was on Zoom, so it was a little hard for us to hear one another as the room got chatty. But I commented to her that I wanted to keep in touch with her and to keep up the friendship, because she always had such a place of honor in my parents' hearts, and I wanted to honor my parents and honor their friendship with her by staying in touch. But I didn't get the chance, and so I'm grateful for this opportunity to leave a message, honoring my parents and honoring Anne's friendship to them for so many years. Thank you for this opportunity. May Anne's memory be a blessing to everyone who knew her, everyone whose lives were touched by her energy and her intelligence and her compassion and her love. Thank you.
Since I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to Anne before she left us, my words today are my farewell to Anne. Anne, you and I didn't meet until we were both fully into retirement. In fact, it was at a meeting of federal retirees where we met, at a NARP chapter meeting in Palm Springs, California, around the year 2006 or so. You became president of that chapter in 2007 and immediately told me that I would make a wonderful service officer and would I please consider taking on that role of the chapter. Well, I had no idea what a service officer was or what a service officer does, but who could say no to Anne O'Keefe? Well, it's now 2021 and I'm still the service officer, and wow, it's been quite an experience. I'm still learning the many different ways a service officer helps fellow NARF members, such as when there's an event in their lives, like a death of a retiree or a divorce or remarriage, a disappearance, which happened, a move to another country, which also happened, and the list goes on and on. But Anne, being who you are, a natural born service officer, there were many difficult cases when we worked together as a team, and I so appreciated your lead and willingness to go those extra hours and extra miles when they were needed. You were indeed a role model, the epitome of kindness and compassion, with a true desire to help those in need. You also enjoyed a good time too, especially when it came to the chapter's annual holiday party, We were so privileged when you brought professional musicians to our parties, and they happened to be your sister, accomplished pianist Judy Woolman, and her friend Ron Kalina, who played jazz harmonica professionally also. They accompanied us all while we sang those old favorite holiday songs. And Ron mesmerized us with his rendition of A Charlie Brown Christmas on his harmonica. It still gives me chills when I remember it. When I look back on our relationship, the theme of books plays a big part. When my husband Jaime died, you immediately sent me a book on widowhood by Dr. Joyce Brothers. It so helped me get through those early days of grieving. And that was the very same book that you read when your dear husband Ed passed away. Then you wrote your own book, launching the Navy Family Support Program, which I happen to have a copy of right here, with a foreword by an admiral of the Navy, no less. And I loved your Christmas letters when you described the major events of the past year, revealing what mattered to you and sharing it with friends and family. Now, that would make an interesting book too. Most of all, Anne, you yourself were an open book to everyone, no pretenses, so genuine, quietly mannered, trustworthy. Whatever you said or did came from sincerity and kindness and from the heart. And so I thank you, Anne, for being my friend and being such a kind, compassionate, loving person who did so much good for so many people. I cherish every memory I have of you. The final chapter of your book may have been written, but the memories you have left with us and your legacy will go on. And I miss you.
You have flown. You have flown. How could we not have known that you, the most intrepid, would be so keen to fledge and fly? East of the sun, west of the wind, north of our reach, south of our ken, the stars are now your pecking grounds, the galaxies your guides. Millions and millions of years chart your lone migration. Pulsars tap out secret codes. Quasars blink and beckon. We see you flashing by in a great arc, feathers fluorescing our Stygian sky, luminance evanescing. Your blazing tail vaults and disappears into nothing. Soon, very soon, we shall meet you at the rim. We'll stand there together, hand in hand, gazing out over vistas too vast to be seen, where a voice calls out our names enigmatically and whispers, "Come on, come on, keep on a-coming, keep on, keep on."